Welcome to the Human Advantage podcast, where culture is created, not claimed. We've been talking about culture for years, but most companies still reduce people to check boxes that are supposed to define an entire human being. We hire for familiarity, we reward sameness, and then wonder why teams struggle. The problem isn't talent, it's the system. And this podcast is about changing that. Diversity beyond checkboxes, culture add over culture fit, and how people think is the real differentiator. Because people aren't categories, they're the advantage.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Human Advantage podcast. I'm hosting Adam Kleckner. I'm with my co-host today, Devin Walker. We've got a super exciting guest with us today, Bob Newman, who is a sales and business development leader. I like the idea to action catalyst and neurodiversity and accessibility advocate. He's got about 10 years of experience building revenue, partnerships, early stage growth. He brings a real strategic mix of strategy, creativity, empathy, and I think the most valuable is lived experience as somebody who's dyslexic, ADHD. And today we just want to talk about what it means to build opportunity that actually is accessible, and why different ways of thinking can be a real advantage. So welcome, Bob.
Hey, it's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad you're here.
You bet, man. So let's jump into this. So obviously, we were just kind of joking before this. We're kind of the team of quote unquote misfits, with Devin dyslexia, my ADHD. You find the best of both worlds, Bob. And I love that you're open about talking about that, right? And you're kind of open about your advocacy work. So if you're comfortable sharing, man, like what has shaped the way that you think, communicate, and kind of build relationships, and how has that neurodivergence kind of shaped the way that you bring that into the workforce?
Yeah. Well, look, I will preface by saying I have very, very supportive parents that let me kind of explore the things that I was very good at. Building confidence as a kid, especially when you're challenged in certain areas, is really key. For me, I went into the arts, which isn't uncommon for neurodivergent people. And I got an undergraduate degree in theater. It was because the challenges that I have with reading and writing adapted to, that my superpower became, I was really great talking to people. I love making connections. Being kind of that extemporaneous piece was where I felt most comfortable. So that's kind of built into my DNA, but I really think that, if it wasn't for my neuro differences, it would have been different. I have 3 siblings. They're doctors and lawyers. They're very quantitative. They're very different than me, right? And they're lovely, and they hold great conversations. I'm not saying they don't, but we definitely have strengths and weaknesses, and this became my strength. So I try to bring that into most of my interactions, and that's how I see it kind of affecting it.
Yeah, I love that. You brought that up. I love that you touched on your brothers and sisters being so different. Devin knows my brother, and knows we're polar opposites in many ways. We actually, funny enough, started businesses together, but man, I couldn't relate to that so much more. That like me and my sister, my brother, are such different people. Like they were straight A students, very book smart, very could study, and I was so opposite of that going through school. So I just had to throw it. I relate to that so much, man. And the theater part's interesting.
What I really love too is, my mother, this was in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
It was not much really spoken about or known about dyslexia, ADHD at that time, right? But my mother saw that I was very bright, but not in the same ways that my siblings were progressing, right? And so whereas teachers saw me as an individual with just individual challenges, my mother saw it within context, right? And that was a real difference maker. So she was a guardian angel for me, making sure that I had what I needed to succeed.
That's huge, man. I love that.
Yeah, I also think it's so tough in education because me growing up in the 90s as well, a lot of teachers were told not to talk about it. And I got lucky because my first grade teacher was retiring, and she was like, well, they can't fire me. I'm retiring. So, this kid needs to get tested. That's just how it goes. But, I think it's hard because, a lot of people like us get put in these, different boxes. And some people consider it different as a strength, which to me I can communicate with anybody, but I think it's hard for a lot of like neurodivergent people to, I don't want to say those differences can be oversimplified, or those challenges come in different ways, but how is like a good way of balancing that, like different in quotes and not oversimplifying it versus like a true strength? Like where does that meet?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like within our community, some people feel very strongly about talking about it as a strength or a superpower or what have you, and then there are those who feel very adamantly that it's not that it's a strength per se. We're different. There are differences, and they should be acknowledged and accommodated, but. And I think context really matters, right? I know when I was in middle school, the last thing I wanted to be was different. I kind of was okay with normal or flying under the radar. That would have been fine. And so in that context, it wasn't helpful. As I got older, and it started earning me money, and I realized I could do things that my colleagues couldn't, then it was a power. Then it was something that I started to learn how to harness or learn how to work with as opposed to work against. Another thing is in school, you're prescribed, what your homework is going to be, in what hours you're learning, what you're learning, all of those things. You don't really have a lot of choice. I didn't do very good in school. I think it's partly a result of that. Once I got into college or graduate school or work, you get to do the things you want to do, when you want to do them, and how you do them well. And then the fact that you're bright and the fact that you're crafty and all those things, that's when they come out. And it's never a matter of smart, not smart, anything like that. It's very obvious then. It's how we approach it as opposed to what we're approaching.
Yeah, I love that, dude. It's so funny. Our experiences in a lot of ways are very similar. Where when I got into graduate school, and I could choose what I wanted, I made the dean's list my first semester. My dad's like, "What the hell? How did you cheat that?" Like, well, I got to do stuff I could actually be interested in and focus on versus just route memorization. He's like, "Okay, like all right, sure."
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think I think a big piece of this kind of superpower discussion, a lot of it boils down to environments, right? Like it's a superpower in the right environment. The wrong environment, it can be pretty detrimental. And I think a lot of us have experienced the school environment being fairly detrimental. Luckily we've landed in spots where we can utilize that in the workforce. But I also think there's this caveat with the superpower in a few ways of, I think when you and I first met, talking about the autism population as if you met one kid with autism, you met one kid with autism, right? Like it's not across the board. It's not the same with everybody. We were talking to a VP of engineering on the pod a little while ago, and he's like, it's a dangerous fine line because, like people come up to you and be like, "Oh, you're autistic. Oh, go solve this math problem." And it's like, well, no, it's not this Rain Man like everybody knows. Like that's not what it is, right? And I also think sometimes the superpower makes people think like, "Oh, well, that's easy for you. It's easy for you to do this." And it's like, yeah, this one thing, but like that kind of diminishes having to navigate a neurotypical path my entire life and what I went through in school and how I had to lock myself in the library with no distractions for 3 hours after class to finally understand and learn something. Like I don't think a lot of people, when you throw out the superpower term, a lot of people realize the work and the struggle and what we've had to go through on the back end to finally be recognized for those strengths.
It's interesting that you bring that up. That's why I'm so forward and really enjoy having conversations about it, because it demystifies it a little bit. It strips away. I think people, that's the thing about labels, right? Is people have an assumption of what those labels connote, and it's very rarely what you think. I think this is how my brain works. Sometimes I like everything wants to come out the door at the same time, and then it gets jammed.
I'm with you.
Look, I think part of it is our responsibility to have those conversations in the workplace right now. I think we know that 1 in 5 at very least is probably neurodivergent. We know most recent study that I kind of saw is 3% of people with a disability disclose that to their employer. 3.
Yep. Saw that same study.
Atrociously low. If you ask managers how comfortable they are in talking with their team about accessibility or how to support them, 74% of them feel uncomfortable in that conversation for a myriad of reasons, right? I think there is that fear that if I say something and I'm wrong, I could be labeled, in some form or fashion. And so I feel often that I have responsibility in demystifying and allowing grace, right? I want them to have grace for me. I'm responsible to say, like, hey, you probably think I read backwards, and I get that, but that's not exactly how it shows up, right? And giving grace is a two-way street. So I think that that's part of it as well.
I love that, man. It's such a good point. And I think, this is my brain goes to the same spot. I have all these things I wanted to say. Now I'm trying to filter out what one.
I'm here for it. Don't worry.
What direction to go with there. But I agree with you. And I think to your point of the 3%, actually disclosing, I've seen recent studies as high as 56% of Gen Z and millennials associate with some form of neurodivergence. It's even higher in Gen Alpha. So if we're looking at half the workforce, coming into the workforce, half the, younger generation of the workforce associated with some form of neurodivergence, it makes that 3% number even more astonishing of going, okay, well, if we have 50% associating with this, but only 3% are comfortable talking about it, that tells you we've got to put these things out there, right? And I think with that, like, in your opinion, what are some things that people still misunderstand about, dyslexia, ADHD, or neurodivergence in general in professional environments?
Yeah, I mean, professional environments is the unique context that we're talking about, right? I think it changes. I think in the workplace, people, it's an affinity group that you can't see, right? You can tell me that you're dyslexic, and you can tell me that you're ADHD or autistic or whatever, and I maybe not understand that, but I can't tell you how many times I have told people how to best operate and work with me, and then in like a month, like it's back to how they best operate, and they're not getting the best out of me anymore, right? And so it's not always that they're misunderstanding. It's that work is a pressure cooker at times, and they want to operate, from their most authentic space, and that doesn't always comport, right? Like, it doesn't always work, in the same way. But that being said, I think, there's a lot of tolerance. There's a lot of more understanding now. I think we're in an interesting sandwich where I think our parents, when they had, neuro differences, you were either slow or you were hyperactive or just not, good in school, whatever. Wasn't really identified. And now our children, everyone, once it happens, people are looking for it. They understand the signs and they know how to test for it. And so it's much more common. But for our generation, it's this, like, I don't really want to poke a bear. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know how to kind of address it. And that adds, right? That adds to it. I think, though, I've started, I know that we probably talked about this in our last conversation. I started a business to help parents of children with disabilities because there is no kind of instruction manual when you get a diagnosis of what to do next and how to navigate, a neurotypical world. I think, that, this is where my brain goes. It sometimes forgets when too many things come into it. But all to say that the pressure cooker of work is a unique context. I think it's different than, sports teams or school or anything else.
Yeah, well, it's such a drastic change too from going to school where everything is structured and you have support and you've got teachers. You get to a workforce where it's like strictly execute, right? Get shit done, go. And I think like that there's not a good bridge behind that, right? There's not a good bridge of how to transition that over, and I think it's a piece that I don't think gets talked about enough. So I think you got a really good point there.
Yeah, I do think you brought up a really good point though with your old manager saying like, hey, here's what I need to get the best out of me, and that's, I'm going to assume that's unintentional because it sounds very like a normal human thing to go back to old ways, and like I totally get that. I've been in the same exact situation, which is kind of why I didn't bring up my dyslexia in the past. Like, I wasn't sure if that was like they didn't care, or they didn't. Looking back at it, I know it's just people being people and reverting to old ways. But like, where? Yeah,
to double
go on, because I see you want to say something.
Yeah, just to double click on that, I also find dyslexic, ADHD, autistic, some of them operate really well kind of behind a screen or with their headphones on and in hyper focus mode, and that's great. But I also see a tendency for leadership, right? For people who think outside the box, or people who are problem solvers in a different way. And so there's also conflict, right? Because if I want to lead in a group and I want to help bring people to where they need to be, but the way that I operate is like markedly different than how other people get the best out of themselves. I have empathy for that as well, right? Like it's collaborating with somebody who operates differently isn't always an easy ask.
Yeah.
No, I think it's real quick, Devin. I think the start, because Silicon Valley, to me, like Silicon Valley was born out of neurodivergence, right? Like almost every one of these innovators, founders, like are somewhere, on the neurodivergent side of things. But I think that's all. There's pressures with the startup world that make it have this stigma. But also, I think when you deal with so many neurodivergent founders, that's where you get this pressure cooker environment, or this like kind of, like battle against how to get stuff done and how to do things, because these leaders, who created these companies have brilliant minds, but not everybody understands the way that they work, and they're not always understanding how to just, put that across. Like I joke, I was a geometry teacher that had me get diagnosed when I was 13 and my freshman year in high school. And the reason I got diagnosed was not the hyperactive Jack Russell Terrier running circles in room 2 burned a hole in the carpet, right? Like I was active, but I was no more active than the other kids my age. But it's because my brain organized things differently. And he was like, I don't understand how you get to the answer, dude. He's like, when you show your work, it makes no sense to me. You're going to struggle because your brain doesn't work in linear patterns. But I think a lot of these founders in Silicon Valley who create these tech startups are very similar, and they struggle with being able to tell their teams what they're trying to get out of them and how they're trying to build and these big ideas that they have. And so I think when you look at leadership with neurodiversity, most of these founders and leaders are neurodivergent. The friction becomes with explaining these really brilliant ideas to people who may not understand the way they think.
I think it also goes back to context, right? Like you brought up a really great example. I have a person, a mother, a single mother. Their son is very clearly ADHD, and they get the problem right in math, right? Like they answer the question correctly. But have you seen how they're teaching them how to get to the answer? Like,
dude, I do this every day with my 7-year-old. I'm like, I'm like, I know what she wants you to put, but it makes no sense how to get there to me. Like, I don't.
And I think this is a really important point that I want to double click on, because getting the right answer in school isn't alone the right answer. They want to see that you did it the way that they want you to do it. Right. That's really hard. That's really hard.
Yes.
What was I going to say to you? I mean, this is where my brain goes. Another thing I would also double click on is context. Steve Jobs was definitely neurodivergent from the readings that I've had.
Yep.
If you ask whether his neurodivergence was a superpower, I bet you his employees would say he was a hard ass. He was really difficult. He was hyper focused, almost obsessive, right, in certain areas. Talk to his shareholders. They'll have a very different opinion on the way that he operates, the way his brain thinks, how he thinks about moving, a business forward. So it's about putting yourself in the right position to succeed. That's huge.
Apple's whole motto was think differently for the longest time. That was their whole marketing campaign, was think differently. If you don't think that didn't carry over from the way he thinks, that was their brand.
And me going nonlinear, when you go through school getting the answer correctly, but getting a wrong grade or a poor grade because you didn't show it properly, you start to develop a weird relationship with right and wrong, or how to operate with people or deliver work. I remember when I was growing up, I was really bad at like the homework aspect. I couldn't sit still to do that. Test taking, I was pretty awful. But if I really sat and I really hyper focused and I did the thing, I came out on top in the final grades. I would have not even the kids, not even fellow students. I'd have fellow parents calling the school when I would do better than their children and say, of course he's doing better. He gets a calculator, or he gets extra time. Of course, if my son or daughter had extra time, they'd be doing well too. As a child, you develop this relationship with success where if I did it, I cheated, right? It's not legitimate in some way. And if I didn't, I'm living up to expectation. This is where I belong. This is what people expect of me. And this is the right thing. And so, that has an effect. And that has an effect as you get older, and you bring that into the workplace. It's part of what your colleagues don't see when you when they put a meeting on your calendar at Monday at 10 a.m., right? Like, that's what they don't see is what brought you to this point. So I think that having these conversations are really important because it's very understandable, but it's very rarely spoken about.
Yeah, so this is a really good point because I have a similar situation that I still get mad about. So I took I have a science degree in college, and I took an A&P class, and I remember we had to do it was a 400 question test on the bones and every distal piece, every piece of the bone. Out of 400 questions, or out of 200 questions, I got 4 wrong. I got a C- because I misspelled most of the words. And I was like, now, as somebody who's dyslexic, I'm like, now you're just taking away my accomplishment. And also, you're a science class. You should know about all of them, about me as a neurodivergent going through these problems. But it's things like that.
The system that we exist in is, I'm not putting a C+ in a Ivy League school, right? Like, you had all the questions correct. You knew how to get to the answer probably better than most, but that's what it means to navigate a neurotypical world as a neurodivergent person.
Yeah, exactly.
It's such a good example, dude. And it's funny because Devin and I both have exercise physiology degrees. We met originally when I owned gyms and worked together then. And so, Devin, I feel you're paying 1,000% on that. On it's amazing you didn't mix up the distal and proximal everything too, because
I still remember all the ways. What is it? For hands, pronate because I'm a pro, or supinate because I want some soup. I still remember all these small things.
The funny part about the way you memorize that, it's probably similar to what I did, is I would tell myself a story, right, or associate it with something where other people maybe just have regular route memorization. The way your brain processes internally of saying, hey, this reminds me of this because of this, that's the piece that people don't understand of what operates behind the scenes, right? What operates in your brain. You're getting the answer right, but if you wrote on your test well, it's pronate because of I'm a pro, and it's supinate because I hold a bowl of soup, and it's this. People are like, what are you talking about, dude? But it's the logic that people don't need to understand because it makes sense to you, right? And I think sometimes we worry too much about, well, how did you get there? Why does it matter how I got there? I got there.
I think I think it's part of, and this adds to the stigma, right? There's a part of, is this person cheating off the person next to them, or is this person, it's why parents then fear, getting the diagnosis, right? And labeling their child, or because they feel that they will be at a disadvantage in school or at work. And to some degree, it's hard to argue, right? It's hard to argue the fear. It's a really legitimate concern. But I agree with you. I remember when I was in math, I used to do 15%. I'd cut a number in half. I'd add it to the original. I'd move the decimal point. That's how I did it. Yeah. They never taught it that way. The people in class were like, "Are you a savant?" I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm so bad at math." I just the way I get there is different, right? And so, I agree with my personal preferences. If you get to the right answer, I want you on my team, right? That's what I want. I'm not going to fear someone.
No, and if you can at least explain the concept and the theory, the minutia of the steps shouldn't matter, right? I understand if you just only know the answer, but you have zero context behind the answer, maybe you are cheating, or but if you can explain conceptually how you got there, you clearly have an understanding of the subject at hand, right? So switching topic slightly, because this is a topic, Bob, I'm curious to get your input on, because I'll be honest with you, man, I struggle with this one a little bit. So you've moderated a lot of conversations around disability inclusion, accessibility. For me, it's a real gray area with neurodiversity, because personally, like, I don't feel comfortable checking the box as disabled, because I don't want to take away resources from somebody who actually would need them or benefit them more than I would. Now, are there certain things that make my brain function better? Like, it's silly, I stand during these because if I sit, I have a harder time, really locking in. But if I need a focus for an hour or two, I have to sit, or else I move around too much and I get distracted. And like, that sounds like such a little thing of having a sit stand desk, but I change my desk 10 times a day, because if I need to focus on an email, I need to sit. If I need to have a conversation or a networking meeting, I have to stand, because I use hands and expression that helps me lock in. And so, but to me, that's not disabled. It's a work preference, right? And so I have a hard time just forcing people to check boxes, and we talk a lot about on this show around, kind of diversity beyond check boxes, right? And so, what do you think most companies are still getting wrong about accessibility and disability inclusion?
The number one thing I think is, first of all, the assumption that like nobody has raised their hand, therefore we don't have a problem. That is something I hear often. Like, well, we do, we ask and nobody brings this to our attention, so we must be doing things right. Like, that's the problem, right? Because we know 1 in 5 at minimum are there, so you have them, right? Especially these startups and tech companies. So like, that's a problem. I would also say, what does disability look like? What does disability look like?
Yeah.
Is because the ADA protects things like diabetes, because you have to have certain accommodations to be able to manage that, right? And so it's challenging the assumption of what somebody thinks disabled is. I think that's part of it as well.
Yeah.
I also think there was a third thing I would mention. I'm sure it will come to me as we talk. But those two are really important ones. I think that they're really very common. Yeah, they come up often.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. But I think this, I think with it being more open and more accessible, I think it makes it a lot easier. I think now it gets treated as compliance, and as a default, almost everybody kind of hates compliance, or that's like kind of the run-on joke, even though it's really important. But how do you think it would change if we started treating it more as like the design of onboarding, or the design of like an employee just everyday living or everyday work, instead of treating it like hey, you have to ask for this and it has to go through some sort of regulations?
Yeah.
I often say accessibility in the workplace isn't a disability specific need. All of us want to be accommodated in a way that we can show up as our most authentic selves and do our best work. And too often, I think people with a disability feel that they need to be the ones to speak very loudly. But I think all of us kind of ask for a this or a that to be able to. I work from home, partially because I know I'd be distracted talking to my colleague if I were in an like I mitigate that. There is also the idea that, and the numbers, forgive me if I'm off, but I believe it's something close to like 84% of people that have a disability acquire it between the ages of 18 and 64, their prime working years. So even if you don't have a disability today, does not mean that the things that you're doing, the road that you're paving, won't benefit you at some point in your working career, or anybody that works for you, right? And so it's not accessibility isn't a disability specific issue. It's an all of us issue at some point.
Yes. Yeah, it's such an important topic. It sticks with me. I was at this accessibility disability kind of panel at Microsoft, right? One of their guys leading it, I believe he had ALS, and he said something that stuck with me. And he's like, listen, all of us at some point in our life will be disabled. Some of us just beat you to it. And he's like, think about your parents when their hearing starts to go, or vision starts to go, or as you age, or like, he's like, but everybody is going to need accessibility at some point in their life. Some of us just get there quicker than others, right? And to me, that stuck with me because it's such a like no sense, like common sense way to look at it, but a viewpoint I didn't really think about until he said that. And it's such an important of like universal design in our systems and including everybody and looking at taking into the fact that we all live the world differently, we all see things differently, we all process differently. To me, that's how systems have to be designed.
Also, thank God, right? Like, if it was
Yeah,
all
yeah.
monitored, we would not progress, right? And so thank God. On top of that, what was I saying? See, this is how my brain goes. What was I going to say? I apologize. It'll come back to me.
We'll go. Here's what we'll do. We'll go. We like to end with a little lightning round, and we have one question at the end we always go with. But let's do this, and this is almost impossible for me, Bob. So if it's longer than a sentence, let it go, because Devin knows long enough working with me now. I don't do anything in one word or one sentence. But a condensed version of this, kind of one sentence. Let's do one word to describe how you think.
One word.
Yep. I mean, it could be two, it could be three, but a short way
first
of
ones that come to
how you-
mind.
Yeah.
Unconventionally.
I love that.
I recognize that I will arrive at a solution differently than you did. Oftentimes a different solution. Even as you're talking with me throughout this podcast, I pause and putting the context at times can be a moment, because articulating what my brain is doing. But I also feel like that's the value I bring to a team, right? Like, if I didn't do it that way, I think I would not be the asset that I am on the teams that I have been. I wouldn't be as successful, certainly, in the career path that I've chosen. And so I kind of lean into, I'm an unconventional thinker. I don't solve you have a ton of them, by the way. Like, you have the conventional thinker. Let me try to bridge, and I say this often, let me bridge the gap between your idea and execution, because I'm usually going to get there in a different way and in a creative way.
I love that. I love that.
That makes the second question a little bit more hard, or maybe easy. I won't give a sentence for this one. But what work environment do you think you work in best?
Me personally.
You personally. Yep. You specifically. I
channel my hyper-focus. Some people don't realize that those who have ADHD can be hyper-focused on something, right? It can work for you or against you. I have learned in the 15, 16 years of my career how to channel that kind of, power, for lack of a better term. And I'm giving you way more than a sentence. I apologize. But
no, you're good.
The answer,
it doesn't matter. Just the concept. Yeah.
I don't want to say we kind of expect it, but we kind of.
The answer to your question there is, what was the question again? I don't even remember. This is
Just your environment. Yeah.
That's working.
Yeah. Essentially, it's putting myself in a position to succeed. We all want to do that.
You touched on something, though, that I think is so funny, because it's the myth that ADHD can't focus, right? And the hyper-focus side of things. If I had $1 for every time over the last 7 years, my wife would come to me and go, dude, are you going to go get the kids? Because I'm so fixated on finishing a work project or finishing something. I look up, I'm like, oh, yep, got to be there in 15 minutes. I'm out, right? And I love my kids. I'm a responsible parent. Don't take that the wrong way. I'm always there for them. But it is we do hyper fixate and we hyper focus on something to where every other distraction in the world you don't even notice, right? Except for whatever you're focusing on. And I think people with the ADHD umbrella gets terminated. The terminology is so associated with you're that squirrel, you're the dog that just gets distracted by everything. Like, dude, there's a whole flip side of that
absolutely.
Completely opposite.
I very easily get sensory overload too. I get overwhelmed by not very overwhelming things, right? But it's it's the environment that I put myself in. So yeah, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So we haven't touched on this, but you're a biz dev sales guy. I like to throw this one in. It doesn't have to be neurodivergence related, or can be. But what's one myth about sales that you would like to kill?
That it has to be cutthroat and sharks and sheep, and that's it. That's a pretty common. And look, there are sharks who kill it, right? And that's great. But I have seen relational salespeople run circles, right? Kill their number year
100%.
over year and have books of business that grow exponentially because people like doing business with them, because people
Yeah.
trust them, right? There's a lot that has not to do with, the hard sell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%.
That makes a lot of sense. Here's the next question. What accessibility practice do you think more workplaces should adopt?
I'm very biased because I want this for myself. First of all, work from home is wonderful. I think there is if you get the work done, if you get what you need out of the person, we're all adults and we should do it. But quiet time for me, sometimes people make fun of me. I put in ear pods, like noise cancelers, but I don't listen to anything. It's like, it's the tinnitus in my ear and nothing else. Like, that's what I need. And I think if we instituted a little bit more of a, hey, we're going to ask you to put your heads down time on the calendar and nobody will bother you during your head down time. Like, we respect that as a business. That would afford a lot of people a lot of leeway that they're not getting right now.
Well, dude, I mean, the kids get nap time at school. I don't see why we can't institute that
Why
at
did we
work,
stop
right?
that?
Yeah, right? That's my thing. I'm like, dude, if I could take a quick half-hour power nap without getting a Slack notification or something, like that'd be a game changer for me.
Anytime I interview for a new position, I tell them, grade me on the output of my work. Don't grade me on how I do it. Don't grade me on where I do it. If you like the outcome, you're gonna like, working together.
I mean, that's
100%.
really what's really important.
Yeah, 100%. So, the last question we like to ask, and we've talked a little bit about what we do and our job, but one thing we firmly believe is people are so much more than their resume, right? So much more than what's on a piece of paper. So, what is one thing that is essential to who you are and how you show up in the workforce that would never show up on your resume?
Oof, that's a good question. I mean, it shows up, but it's not explicit, right? It's the tea leaves. I love being on stage. I perform. I was in the before times. I was a musician, a traveling musician. That was a significant portion of my life, and sales lets me do that as well. But it's not as if I put, all of my theater productions or, the opening for Willie Nelson. Like, it's there, but it's not something I would maybe lean on. And I agree with you so much. Resumes have become a little like formulaic. This is how it's supposed to look. But I'm not by definition, I'm different than the formula, right? Like I don't adhere to that. And so I always ask, we are so much more than a little piece of paper. And I really encourage people to lean into the things that help them survive, right? They have a story to tell.
Yes.
They're really good at something. And maybe that doesn't show up on that piece of paper. I could not agree with that more.
Yeah. I will say there's one thing, Bob, I will disagree with. If I open for Willie Nelson, it's going on the resume and it's going everywhere. Everybody's going to know.
I know.
That was something.
That's awesome.
That's so cool.
I will say, I think, with the ADHD side, I do think, being on stage and performing, there's a certain amount of pressure to that, right? One of my favorite quotes, and chaos to it too, right? You kind of block everything out and you zone in on that. And one of my favorite quotes that I heard with ADHD is a NFL quarterback who said, us folks with ADHD, we find comfort in the chaos and we create chaos in the calm. Right. And so like when things are crazy and there's so much going on, like we have this uncanny ability to just kind of block it out, focus on the task at hand, get it done and find comfort when things are chaotic. But if we have nothing to do, we tend to create that chaos. We tend to go like, I need something.
I could not have said that any better. I think that's exactly right. I have specifically worked in early stage startups, venture-backed kind of startups, pre-seed through Series C, sometimes private businesses. But because it's chaotic, you're going to wear a lot of hats. The day tomorrow will not look like the day yesterday. And that is where I do my best work. That's where I shine, where others don't. And so I've
100%.
actually kind of carved out specifically to be in those environments because I know I'll climb faster than others. And I'll also say one thing that and I apologize because I come back around. We talked about something that employers get wrong. Right now, diversity is kind of a dirty word, right? It's like, it's a weird, we're living in it. And obviously I think inclusion is the most inclusive, ERG group. It touches race. I'm not going to wake up one day and be black, right? It's not going to happen, but I could wake up one day and be disabled, right? And so it touches all of us. It is the most, across the board thing. That being said, we do it because it really touches your bottom line. This isn't kumbaya, right? This isn't let's make everybody feel good about themselves and feel good about the kombucha and the ping pong table. It's not that. You literally will have higher returns, more efficient workers, all of that. And so it's this, we're not advocating for the heck of it. We're not doing it because it makes us feel better. We're doing it because it's going to impact your bottom line. You're gonna succeed better.
Well, I think it's so spot on, right? And with diversity comes innovation, but I also think it's what is diversity. And diversity is diversity of thought, diversity of lived experiences, diversity of approach. And my wife being African American, that doesn't mean her lived experience growing up as the only black female in her high school in Montana is the same as somebody who grew up in Chicago or New York or So to me, we got to reframe diversity in diversity of thought, diversity of lived experiences, how we show up, who we are, and look at it, almost broaden the term of diversity, because I think it got a little too siloed for a while. And we became too obsessed with labels and checkboxes, when in reality, we've got to build systems that encompass we're all unique, we're all different, we all approach things differently.
It has to be said out loud, though. We are in a time where, we are in a time where our commander-in-chief says you are not qualified to be the president if you are dyslexic, like Gavin Newsom recently acknowledged that he is. The chilling effect that has on a worker for raising their hand or a parent to get a diagnosis, the chilling effect that it has across the board is going to do a lot of harm. Over there. It's more than just saying names or anything like that.
I think we just have to I think it's because things get so polarized, and that's a big reason why we started this podcast, because I think there's so many more people who look at diversity the way that we do, through the lens of we're all unique, we're all different, we all have different value we bring to the table. To me, that's really important to put out there, right? Because siloing people to checkboxes, siloing people to labels, that just creates separation. It doesn't create inclusion. Right. And so I think that's the whole point of these conversations, Bob, the whole point of bringing you on, the whole point of doing this. And I hope people leave this conversation relating to this and saying that was me, or that's my kid, or I knew kids in class who thought that way. Right. Because it's touched all of us. Right. And so I think putting this out in the world, I think listening to your story, man, there's gonna be a lot of people that relate to that. So we really appreciate you doing this, because I promise you, we're no longer going to be the oddballs. I think all of us are normalizing it.
I'm very grateful that you're doing what you're doing. I think these conversations are so important. Scream it from the rooftops. And keep on doing it, asking tough questions and digging deeper, because I think the more you do it, the more you normalize the conversation, and that's great.
Yeah, I love it, man. Well, there will be. Hopefully you'll come back on again, man, because I think this is a conversation that is so hard to fit into 30, 45 minutes. So we'll have to do another one of these down the road, because it's just one that we got to keep unpacking.
I'd love that very much. Thanks for the time today.
Awesome. Thank you, man. All right.
Pleasure.
Cheers, everybody. Till next one.
Take care.
See ya.